So our next speaker is going to tell us a little bit about the programmatic trends for 2019. So please welcome Nigel Gilbert at AppNexus.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you. Sorry, it feels a little bit loud. It's great to be back here in Helsinki. I was here in about February this year, and we were presenting in partnership with Alma at an event. And I remember asking very kindly if I could come back again. Could it please be summer? And the next invitation I get, of course, is the middle of winter, almost. It's dark and cold. I did not prepare for that. And then very ironically, we get the event called Hot or Not. So I'm sure the irony is clearly not lost on any of you either. I should be used to this, being English, but you never really get used to how cold it can get here. Well, so Hot or Not being the topic, we figured that rather than this being a standard traditional keynote where I stand here and just give you a few very high-level concepts, and sometimes people nod or people look at their phones and figure out whether or not they find it interesting. This time, we are going to ask for a little bit of participation. Very light, but let's try and have a bit of fun. Okay, these events can otherwise always be a bit the same. They blend into each other. I promise it won't be very difficult. I'm not going to call anybody out. But let's just see whether or not we all agree with each other. And more importantly, because it is my presentation, whether or not you agree with me. Let's see where we go. The reason that I think Hot or Not is actually a wonderful topic is because we are in one of the most confusing parts or confusing times within marketing and within digital that probably has ever occurred. You could argue we're at peak confusion, but I'm not really sure we are. It seems to get more and more confusing every year. Clients will read things in the press. They'll ring you at your agency, or you're a publisher, or maybe you're the client and you're being contacted by your agency. You don't understand whether or not this is important, whether or not it's going to impact your business, whether or not you should be hiring people to focus on a particular topic, whether it will deliver you any revenue, whether it will help you get more customers. It's confusing. I find it confusing too. I think everybody is the same. Of course, we have a business to focus on, so we have a certain path that we want to follow, as is the case with everybody else. So what we thought we'd do today, to try to cut through some of this, is to play a bit of a game. The game is not having a very confusing title. This is my marketing department's image gallery, by the way, so you'll have to excuse some of them. They've even also given me an example so you can tell the difference between something that's hot and something that's not, just in case anybody was confused by that. The original slide here had a boy band on the left and some sort of old vintage band on the right. I sort of ruled that out just because that wasn't very objective of them. But what we're going to do, I've got 10 topics, a minute and a half on each one. I'll put it up, ask for a show of hands who thinks it's going to be hot next year and who thinks it's not. So bear in mind, it could be an important topic, but whether or not it will be hot next year, that's the question, okay? So please participate. It's just a bit of fun. Let's go with the first one. We'll start very easily. This image, which has been stretched into widescreen, apologies for the formatting, is the idea of identity versus behavior, or identity and behavior. Who thinks these topics will be important next year? Hands up. Anybody think not? Okay, all right, good. I've gone for hot and not. I'll tell you why. The first one was identity. This image is supposed to represent that you may not know who somebody is, but you know what they're doing. Now, the reason that they've brought this one up is we've been obsessed with first-party data in programmatic, completely obsessed with it. Probably 90%, 95% of programmatic buying is done on first-party data. Now, that's fine on one hand, but of course it's led to a lot of challenges and confusion and problems in the market. We'll come on to some of those, whether or not we think those are hot topics as well, but behavioral. So I'm suggesting that first-party data needs to be less hot, and behavioral data in the context of what somebody is doing, which has been almost completely forgotten in the context of programmatic, is something that we should be focusing on next year, so that will be hot. So apologies for starting with one that's both. Let's go to the second one. This is clickbait and fake news. Who thinks this is a hot topic for next year? Who thinks not? Okay, all right, okay. So a few people decided to stop voting, I could see that. let's not have that as a trend for the next 10, 15 minutes. Okay, so everybody that said not is agreeing with me. I don't think it is either. Now, why has this been a topic for the last 2, 3, 4 years? It's simply because, again, the obsession with first-party data has meant that people don't necessarily consider where the ads are running. All they're considering is what's the identity of the user that they're targeting. What segment is that person in? So they've ended up on fake news sites, clickbait sites, and of course publishers or fake news publishers have seen the opportunity. They've built up pages, they've built up some volume, loaded it programmatically, sold it very cheaply, and this has become a problem. It only became a problem because of the buying behavior. Bear that in mind. It didn't become a problem because users like fake news. They don't really. They like clickbait because it's a gallery of something, and it gets monetized because people are targeting users, not targeting context. So I think we can get rid of this. Don't think it's a hot topic for next year. Very good. What's the third one? This is supply and value chain transparency. Hot topic for next year. Who thinks so? Okay. Who thinks not? Okay. This chap's got his supply chain completely organized. It's good for him. I think it is. Clearly, it's going to be a very challenging topic. However, I changed this one this morning after consulting a couple of folks that I know in this market, because I believe in Finland you could get control of this quite quickly. You're quite lucky in some cases because you don't have as much fragmentation, you don't have as much disparity in terms of the ability for the advertiser to talk to the publisher. You shouldn't allow, and I don't believe you have allowed, technology to come in the middle and disintermediate. So I believe you can actually stop this from being a hot topic, which is why I put not. I'm not trying to be confusing and catch people out. I want everybody to get 10 out of 10 today. But that's why I've put not. Still a hot topic, but I don't believe that it can actually cause problems in this market for next year. Fourth one, this is my marketing team's representation of clients taking control. Not clients flying planes. I don't really know why that came out as the example. But who thinks clients taking more control is a hot topic for next year? Who thinks not? Okay. I think it is. And I think the main reason for this, of course, is because there has been now a lack of trust. When you look at the abuse of retargeting, the lack of context, obviously, the data regulation that's come into play, of course, rumors and I think scaremongering about supply chain transparency, oddly, quite often created by the technology companies, has led to clients thinking, well, I need more control. I need to take more control. I know you're going to hear more about this in the presentation directly after mine, so I won't go into too much detail, but I think clients should take more control. Whether or not they in-house, I think is different, but I think they should take more control, and not only of their agency relationships, but also of their technology relationships. So I think the problem I have with this is when clients say, oh, I've got my agency under control. Okay, how about your technology partner? Do you know what they're doing? Companies that clients don't tend to understand very well, and yet they put their faith and trust in them and penalize the agency. I think that's risky, so I think clients taking control is a good idea, as long as it's done correctly. Okay, we're doing well here, about halfway through. Here's a good one. Hot for next year, who thinks so? Who thinks not? Interesting, okay. Well, I've said it is. I think it's quite hard for me to stand up here and tell you that it's not. That being said, I think the context is slightly different. Of course, GDPR came in this year. It was implemented well, but of course there's been challenges with that system. We see that the transparency and consent framework from IAB Europe has the right intentions, but of course because it's a framework, it doesn't have the governance that a policy would actually bring in, so that needs to be looked at again. We know that we have e-privacy coming later this year, which could, in the words of the MEP, fix the mistakes we made with GDPR. We don't know what he's referring to there, but we're going to expect something. So let's wait and see. But it's still a great topic because, of course, it drives that relationship between the publisher and the consumer, and it means that people have to be diligent about the technology they're working with. So I've said it's hot. You will disagree with me. That's okay. You know this market better than me, so maybe I can get some opinion from you directly after this. All right, keep moving through. That is a representation of AI. Who thinks this is hot for next year? Interesting. Who thinks not? Excellent. I think you're all right. Let me tell you why. I'm not cheating here or trying to hedge my bets. AI is hot for the reason that it's available. AI exists in the market. I've said that it's not because I think it's quite grossly misunderstood in terms of what it can actually be used for. Most people that we talk to about AI who have an opinion on AI for advertising say, well, this is great, it's going to get me better performance. I'm going to get an advantage on my competitors because things are going to work better. You think, okay, that's not really what AI does. AI is always represented in the press by fascinating, wonderful applications like somebody winning at chess or winning at Go or playing the piano or, I don't know, hoovering the carpet. But in reality, the application in advertising doesn't look like that. AI is obviously the ability to represent and replicate human behavior. So do humans there toggle the DSP to get better performance, or do they spend most of their time managing line items? It's the latter. So AI is actually hot on the basis it can save time if used correctly, which is actually quite a different application. So I would urge you to consider really what your application could be, what you could use it for, and make sure that if it's hot for you, then take advantage. Still going here, this is not a question of whether or not the Alexa will be hot next year. It's just the only picture we could get. This is voice search. Hot next year. Who thinks so? Who thinks not? Okay, I'm in agreement with the former. This is hot. We've put it up there simply because I think user take-up is going to be quite significant next year. I don't believe, maybe I should have said hot and not, although then I'm hedging on every slide, which isn't really very fair for the presentation. The reason that it could be not hot is because there's only really one company that plays in this space. That means it's a very dangerous advertising opportunity because there's no regulation, there's no measurement, there's no competition, there's no performance metrics. That's a very scary place to be for an advertiser. It's not audited. It's not even really understood. Who has an Alexa? I've got one. Have you ever had it talk back to you when you haven't been talking to it? Yeah, it happens all the time. It's really creepy. So this is actually a very uncharted territory for advertisers. Nobody knows what it means. So I think the take-up will be good next year, but it needs to be more competition. There needs to be other players in this space in order for it to become a real opportunity so that people really understand what they're getting to grips with. Voice search, moving on to, this is a representation of open algorithms. I can see that you all guessed that already just from looking at the picture. Let me tell you what an open algorithm is before I ask you the question. What I mean by this is something that you can see how the decisions are made. Voice search is a brilliant example. When you ask Alexa something, what's the basis that it makes the decision? Another really good example would be applying for credit cards. You know, when somebody says, well, let me just put your details into the computer, they get as much data as they can, and they come back and say, you haven't been approved, or you have been approved. Do you know the basis on which they made that decision? How about search results on a standard search engine? How is it bringing up the top results? Does anybody know? Will you get the same results as somebody else? Probably don't know. So open algorithms, is this a hot topic for next year? Who thinks yes? Okay, who thinks no? Okay, all right. This is good though because there's a bit of a split of opinion here. I think it is because they're available, particularly in advertising placements, they're available. And as a market, whether you're an industry body, a buyer, an agency, a publisher, you can push for this to become open and transparent. I think it should be. I think everybody deserves the right to actually understand the decisions that are being made, particularly with voice search as that grows. I think you'll see increasing pressure from auditors to understand the decisions that are being made. It's already the case with credit card applications, mortgages. They insist that you actually have to be transparent to show how you're awarding somebody the debt, if you like. And it should be the same in advertising. Okay, nearly there. Blockchain. I know everybody's heard of this. Who thinks this is hot for next year? Who thinks not? Yeah, I'm going to go not. This is probably the word that's been most disruptive and possibly even annoying this year. Blockchain is, of course, real. Of course it is. It totally exists. The applications are there. You could decentralize contracts, you could put RFPs on the blockchain, then people could submit responses on there. But why? Why would you do that? What's the requirement to do that? Do you not trust that somebody wouldn't toggle the RFP that you send them? You know, the PDF can actually solve a lot of these problems today. You can't transact in real time on the blockchain, it's not fast enough. There's not enough engineers in blockchain. It's a technology infrastructure, so it has to have scale to be relevant, which it doesn't. So not for next year. I actually think there's another cycle that we'll have to wait for blockchain to become real. Another cycle meaning a recruitment cycle, an employment cycle, possibly even an education cycle. We need more graduates who understand how to do this as well. So I would actually argue that 2021, 22, before it even becomes relevant, let alone applicable. Okay, one more, last one. Publisher data. Who thinks this is hot for next year? Who thinks not? Okay, so I think this is, and I'll tell you why. When you look back at the challenges that we explained earlier on in the presentation, first-party data retargeting has been abused, legislation has been brought in to cover that, volume is hard to come by, context is completely forgotten. So, what's the next bastion of quality data? Publishers have login data, identity data, consent, direct relationship with the consumer, and they have context, which is the second most important targeting criteria after first-party data, meaning where is the ad running? So, publisher data, once it gets mobilized, once it gets applied in the technology, I think this is going to be an extremely hot opportunity, particularly in markets where you have reliable, trustworthy publishers as well. I'm saying it because I can see some of them sitting down here. It's the right thing for me to say. And I don't want to get lynched on the way out. But I do agree that this is a big opportunity in all markets. We're certainly seeing this in Germany and in France as well. So big, big opportunity. Okay, well, I would leave you with 3 thoughts. Keep an eye on what we call signal versus noise. It's really hard to tell the difference between something that's relevant and something that's not, particularly when there's lots of companies feeding the press all the time with stories. Your clients are calling you. You're worrying where to prioritize. Have you got the right people in place? It's almost worth employing someone to just filter. At AppNexus, we actually have individuals in the marketing team who curate the news stories, chop off what they don't think is relevant, and then send it round to the executives to say, only worry about these things, and here's why. It's actually quite helpful. Otherwise, you can get lost in all of this stuff. And very much keep interrogating. So when you do see something that you think is important, dig down onto what the actual relevance to your business is. Very much with blockchain, I think that's a good example. All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh,
just stay for a while.
Oh, okay, apologies.
Maybe some questions.
Sorry.
Anyone have questions to Nigel? Somebody?
I thought participation was going well there.
Yeah,
everybody's shut down now.
Most interactive one. I have one.
Okay.
Because you had some topics there, like some hot, some are not that hot. But what do you personally think? What is the hottest one for next year?
I personally think it's the difference. It has to be a data topic. The extent to which I can actually isolate it's this part of data or that part of data. But I can't emphasize enough how far people have gone with first-party data and the problems that can cause. There are alternatives to this, and I think people need to start embracing that. I would argue for a buyer, there is a genuine opportunity to be the first mover on things like publisher data, on things like behavioral data and context. So I would argue that in terms of what's real today and what can make a difference to your business, it also closes the supply chain and gives you more control and relationship with the people that you're buying and selling from. So I think that's probably the hottest.
There's a question.
Which markets do you think are leading the development in digital marketing?
So which markets are leading the development? In terms of pushing the boundaries of what's possible, I think the Netherlands is probably leading still. It's a smaller market. It's a bit of a greenhouse for technical innovations. In terms of how to make money, both buyers and sellers, I think it's the UK. But that's because we lack legislation, and to some extent we lack diligence in these things too. I have to hold my hands up there. But I could tell you everybody's making a lot of money, whether or not you agree with all of the areas of it. And that's, you have to be innovative to do that. But then in terms of, I think, how to manage, let's say, a supply chain and how to do the right thing, I think probably Germany. They've been very good at supporting each other, the advertisers supporting the important publishers and maintaining that relationship is probably the Germans.
Any more questions? If not, then let's give a big hand to Nigel.
Thank you.
Thank you.